doula with Dona, and I wanted to share what I have in my welcome packet for my clients. Whenever I meet with a client, whether it's an interview or a first meeting, I will bring my welcome packet with me and falling out. And I always make sure that it's in something neat and clean, like a small binder. I'm gonna run through really quickly what I have, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail. First thing I have is DONA International's Client Confidentiality Release Form. Next is DONA'S Code of Ethics and their Standard of Practice. After that is my company's contract. Moving along is my client intake form. Following that is a birth plan worksheet. Next up is what I call the library, which is a list of books that I have on certain topics that I think would be helpful for my clients that they can borrow at any time. I also have what I call the emotions worksheet. And last but not least, I have a couple copies of early labor contractions record sheets. On a first meeting with a client, I will bring all of this paperwork. Sometimes I'll bring multiple copies. Now kind of just breaking down my thought process on what I include in my welcome packet. Let me just go through some details of all the parts and pieces. First up is the client confidentiality release form, and this is arguably the most important piece of each of your qualifying births. This outlines your client's rights in terms of their confidentiality. This is saying that we're not going to share any of that information with anybody else besides our backup doula, if applicable, and with DONA International, who will not share their private information further beyond them. Technically, you need to have your client sign this before you start taking any personal notes on them whatsoever, even their full name and their birth date and their estimated due date. You need to have this signed and understood before you start taking notes. Next up is DONA'S Code of Ethics and Standards of Practice. This is how we run, and this is the agreement we have when working towards our certification and when we become certified with DONA. This is how we work. And just as important as it is for us as certifying doulas to understand, I believe it's just as important for our clients to understand as well, knowing that they're hiring a DONA doula and that these are our standards and that we hold ourselves to very high standards. Next up, I have my personal contract, and this has been a work in progress, and I'm sure it's going to continue to kind of evolve and develop. But I just break down first and foremost what is a doula and what is not a doula. That is more specifically explained in the Code of Ethics and Standards of Practice, but it's good just to kind of put it into my own terms and have it in one concise place, which is my contract, when I hand it over to my clients. So I talk about what I do and do not do, how I work in terms of prenatal appointments, what they can expect at those, what I might offer at those, how they can contact me, and I outline what it means to be on call for them. This is also a really great opportunity to set personal boundaries between yourself as a business person and your client as a client. I also talk about how it's best to contact me when they believe they're in labor, what happens if they go into labor before our agreed on-call period, what they can expect at a cesarean section. And one thing I do want to note, it's important to remind your client, so that there are absolutely no surprises on their baby's birthday, that a lot of times in cases of emergency C-sections, there are a lot of hospitals that do not allow anybody else in the OR. So I note that it is their responsibility to secure a spot for their doula in the OR and have that conversation with their care provider beforehand. I also talk about the postpartum hour or two that I'll spend with them, how I can help with initiating breastfeeding and getting settled into their postpartum room. I also talk about my postpartum follow-up visit. And once again, I break down client confidentiality because you honestly cannot stress it enough. I don't think this is a really big part that is going to protect you and make your client feel very safe. So I break down conditions of my volunteer services and how payment works. And at the end, I have just an agreement and they will date and sign. And if they have a partner that is going to be partaking in decisions with them, then I have a client's partner signature and date as well. This is another great opportunity to exercise inclusive verbiage. So I never say something like a husband or a wife. I always make sure that I say a client's partner. And then taking that a step further, you never want to assume that your client is going to have a partner that will be partaking in the birth. So I always make sure that I say, if applicable, here's, the line for the client's partner. My client intake form is a great opportunity for me to kind of understand my client a bit more. There are a bunch of parts and pieces. The first part is just the client's contact information, the best way to get in touch with them, whether that be phone, text, or email, their baby's information if they know the gender, if they have a name for the baby, which is just a really great little side note if you want to work on some postpartum gifts for your client. And then I also have a section for their healthcare providers, where they're going to be giving birth, if they have a backup hospital, who their primary doc is, whether it's a physician or a midwife. And then I also ask if they've taken any classes such as childbirth, parenting, or breastfeeding. And if they had said no, this is a great opportunity for us to kind of use our community reference guide and say, here's a list of really great resources in the area that you can partake in if you wish to. And then I get into their current pregnancy. So I ask if there are any medical conditions that is affecting this pregnancy. Getting into previous pregnancies is probably the best tool to kind of give us a timeline. So I ask if this is their first birth, and if not, I ask how many children they have and what their ages are. And things especially like due date, actual birthday, and hours labored will really give you a great sense of how this person labors. And a lot of times, mothers who delivered quickly in the past will tend to have quick labors, and vice versa. I then get into the birth experience, so I ask things like, what are you most excited for? What is your partner most excited for, if applicable? Do you have any fears or concerns? What's your vision? What are your expectations of a doula? Do you have any special requests for this birth, such as music, aromatherapy, or a water birth? So this, a lot of times, gives me a really great sense of why they hired a doula in the first place. A lot of times, clients won't really be able to express their reasoning behind it, but this gives me a really great idea of what they're looking for, what they want to change, what they want to experience. I researched a bunch of different birth plans, and I just sort of compiled some different options, and I tried to cover all the bases so that when I get a new client, they can sit down, look at this, and just check off which option they are most interested in. And of course, they can leave anything blank that they want. But I go through as much as I can without it being too overwhelming. The main categories of the birth plan are the environment, during labor, pain management, and postpartum. So once a client fills this in, I take all of their checks and all of the options that they want included on their birth plan, and I will consolidate it on one single sheet that has their name, their due date, their birthday, their estimated due date, and all of their information on top. And I'll print out a few copies and make sure that I bring them with me. I will keep them in my client's binder that I'll keep for them. And I make a couple copies so that I can spread it around in the hospital. I might hand it to some nurses, I might tape it on a wall, I might put it on the back of the door, things like that. The library is a list of books that I feel can be helpful or informative for some of my clients. And there are a few different categories. The first main one obviously is pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. And a lot of the books that are required for our certification are included in this list. And then I also have just some extra ones that I've picked up here and there or that I really found helpful. I've added those to the list. And then I also just added a picture of the book and a little kind of synopsis on what to expect in the book. I also have a list for poetry. That can be really helpful for a lot of different people. And then I also have alternative, and that's things like aromatherapy and crystals and gems. This is my emotions worksheet, which I had briefly mentioned. This is good for a couple different reasons. This mostly is really great for me to understand how my client deals with different circumstances that might be uncomfortable. And if they have a partner that is going to be partaking in the labor and birth, this is also a really great kind of cheat sheet, I would call it, for them as well. And they're simple, and it just says things like, when I'm upset or frustrated, ... when I'm tired or exhausted, ... when I'm in pain or uncomfortable, when I'm feeling irritable, when I'm feeling nauseous, ... And this just gives my client an opportunity to say, you know, when I'm frustrated, a lot of times I just really want a hug from my significant other, or I just really want alone time. When I'm irritable, I really hate being touched. This just allows them to pull from previous experiences and share kind of tips and tricks that might not come up in every post or every prenatal meeting for me to kind of get a gist of what to expect when these feelings arise during labor. At the end of my welcome packet, I also include an early labor contractions record sheet, and this breaks down how to time contractions. And sometimes timing contractions isn't the most intuitive thing. I also have a section for comments so that they can note contraction strength, if they ate anything, if they got sick to their stomach, if they used any coping mechanisms, if there was any discharge that they wanted to note. It also just gives them a really good sense of what goes into timing a contraction and understanding that 5-1-1 rule that we talk about all the time. Like I said, it's not the most intuitive thing, so it's best to just kind of give them, you know, as many resources as possible. So like I said, this is kind of the bread and butter of how I keep track of my clients, their progress, their history, what they're interested in, and this is something that I bring with me to our first meeting, to all of the prenatal meetings, to the birth, and again at our postpartum follow-up. So that in a nutshell is my client welcome packet. Like I said, it's always developing, especially as I'm growing as a doula and my business is growing and developing as well. So I hope this helped some of you just kind of get started, especially if you're in the early stages of becoming a certified doula. I'm still working on completing my certification packet. If you guys are interested in keeping up with my doula experience, my doula journey, I have a blog that I post to pretty frequently, and you can find that at www.sacredsage.com/blog, and then another /, and I'll put that right here. You can also follow me on Instagram at sacredsagebirth. Somewhere around here. Anyway, I appreciate you guys watching this video, and I hope that it reaches some of you new doulas in a similar position as me. Thank you guys.